Hello and welcome everyone once again to the Two Matts and a Jeff podcast. Matt Moyer along with Matt Bannon and Jeff Moyer. We're just some middle-aged guys talking sports, and our topic today is the most overrated players of all time in the NBA. So we have our list we've developed independently of the guys we think are most overrated players, and we're going to start with who's starting here? Jeff is going to start. Give us your number 5 most overrated player.
My number 5 is his nickname was Stevie Franchise. Steve Francis played for some few teams, but a lot of them know him from Houston. I looked at, he was a second overall pick. He played 11 seasons, so a good amount of seasons in the NBA. In those 11 seasons, he was only in the playoffs one season. And in that, he only won one game. So, one playoff season, one win. And, besides being the second overall pick, he was also the Rookie of the Year. And he was a runner-up in a dunk contest. So I think that's one of the big things. He had some flash, obviously, and with the dunks and stuff. But, he just didn't produce. So
I believe we saw him play in Washington, D.C. with the University of Maryland back in probably 02 maybe, or 03. I can't remember. Yeah. Whenever the Terps won it.
That would have been, yeah.
So whenever that was, I'm pretty sure we saw him play, actually.
So that's my number 5.
Right. So my number 5, actually, is a pretty accomplished player, but I think he's overrated, is Carmelo Anthony. Because I think Carmelo Anthony is offensively a ball stop. Now, this is total career. Just for that. So a couple things I wrote down was has no motivation defensively, and he can play defense, because I can specifically recall a game back when he was at Denver where they played a regular season game in Cleveland, and he and LeBron went toe to toe. This is after LeBron was in the league for a few years, so it's not like he was a rookie or anything, and Anthony was taking advantage of whatever. But they went toe to toe, and Carmelo actually cared about what was going on and played good D or solid D or whatever. So I just think that when he went to New York, I don't know if it was the lights or whatever, but he was not willing to adjust his game. And for as good a player as he is and can be, I just don't think he achieved what he could have. That's my thing. It's not that he was bad at all. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, I'm sure. But I just think that he could have been, I don't think he could have maybe been LeBron-ish or whatever, but he could have been D-Wade. He could have achieved what D-Wade achieved as far as I'm concerned. And the only reason he's not actually higher on my list is because he sort of reinvented himself in Portland, where he's accepted a role or whatever later in his career and adjusted, which he could have adjusted even as a star, and his success with three-pointers in the Olympics, the couple games or a couple times he's been in the Olympics either way. So otherwise, he might even be higher on my list.
Well, he may show up on my list, but he's not my number 5. But, my criteria really when I'm looking for an overrated guy, Matt, you hit on a lot of things. Guys that are Hall of Famers or possibly Hall of Famers. Guys that you think of are like, when you call out that name, everyone goes, oh, yeah, I know that guy. He's a great basketball player. Right. But when you dig deeper into the stats, his stats might be good, but they never got it done. So my number 5 is a guy that you young kids might not know a lot about, but he is a guy who's a Hall of Famer, and he was the MVP for a season, 79-80, and that's George the Iceman Gervin. So I looked at his stats. He's got great stats. He scores a lot of points, 26.2 points, and, 0 NBA titles. Never got it done. And a lot of the guys you'll see this guy's a 12-time All-Star, so a great player. But how great are you if you can never get your team to the next level? For me, that's a big part of it, because that requires not just being a great player, but the willingness to sacrifice your own individual statistics and things for the success of the team. So some of the guys that didn't make my list, and I won't call out their names now, that's what you'll see, that I just think says everything. A guy like Michael Jordan, who is not overrated at all, learned how to win by learning how to give the ball up to a Steve Kerr or a B.J. Armstrong or a Paxton when he needed to win. and did the job he needed to do to win the game.
Trust his team.
Yes. So, these guys that are overrated, that's where I'm at. So, my number 5, the Iceman, George Gruden. He
Okay.
can finger roll, though.
Yes.
Finger roll. All right, so my number 4 is a current player, and it's Russell Westbrook. A lot of you, if anybody of you out there are young, probably may really like Russell Westbrook, but some stuff I wrote down. He's got a nice long career. He's in 13th-year career. He only made one finals appearance, and he's never won a title. I wrote down lots of triple doubles, but ... He was an MVP. He was a scoring champ. He was All NBA. But also then look, he averages the most turnovers in NBA history. So, he's a very flashy player. Believe me, he gives it all.
No, yeah.
I mean, he gives it all. But I think of him again, not taking his team to the next level. He literally made one finals appearance. So
He would be an honorable mention on my list, I'll say that. And I'll say it right here, kids. He will never, ever win a title. It's not within him to do what is necessary to win a title. I agree with you, Jeff. Overrated. Great personal statistics. He would rather look good and win, or look good and lose, than look bad and win. I mean, not even bad. Statistics wouldn't be as great. Yeah. Good choice.
So my number 4 is a guy back in the day, Glenn Big Dog Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
So Glenn Big Dog Robinson was out of Purdue University. He was the number 1 pick in 1994. And his rookie contract of 10 years, $68 million is the reason why the rookie salary cap is in place today. Because
I didn't know that. I knew he had it. I
he
knew
had some
background.
accomplishments. He made the playoffs when Ray Allen and Sam Cassell came to Milwaukee. They made the playoffs, and that might even take the Sixers. That might have been the year that they took the Sixers to the game in the Eastern Conference Finals, and the year the Sixers went to the finals. So, but for number 1 pick and all that money, he did not achieve what he should have achieved.
I was gonna say I put him as an honorable mention because he was number 1 pick. He had 11 seasons and only made the playoffs 4 years, and probably like I said, he had no other help for those other ones.
Right.
But again, I also look at because you'll notice in some of my other picks here, he had the name Big Dog.
Yeah,
right.
I think with a guy like him, he'd make my honorable mention list because he's not an all-timer. Like if you say a big dog, Glenn Robinson, a lot of people, kids might not even know who he is. So he's a guy I think is overrated coming out of college. Clearly, at college overrated, but NBA. That's why I didn't. That again, my criteria of these are guys that made the Hall of Fame. So my next guy is a Hall of Famer. He's a great player. It pains me to put him on the list because he's from the generation of guys I loved watching, but I had to. Dominique Wilkins, the Human Highlight Film. What did he ever do? Well, I can tell you, he went to the 10 playoff opponents. He was out in the first round 7 times. He just never got it done. And I know a lot of guys might say, well, he had to go through Michael Jordan. Not really. He never got to him because he just never got his team to that next level. And he had some decent guys around him and stuff. 16 seasons. He scored a lot of points, 24.8 points a game, 6.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He was, 96% from the free throw line, I think.
Really? Dominique? Wow, I would have never known that.
No. I'll double check that number. That must be wrong.
I don't know.
But
Possibly.
the point for me is he never did anything. Except for win dunk contest and things. He's a Hall of Famer. He's one of those people think is all-time great. But really, what did he do was all that great? He never really won.
Well, I remember when I was doing the list, I saw him on a list. I'm like, really? And then I was starting to think about, but I did think about the Jordan thing. But maybe, like you said, if you didn't play him that often.
What's the Bird thing? Is it
But
Jordan thing?
well, the other part is I might go just say that he didn't. I don't remember him have anybody else.
Right.
And maybe that could be maybe people didn't like to play with him. I don't know. Or just was it the Hawks not giving him anybody? I don't know.
I should remember, and I don't remember who we had with him.
He didn't really.
Besides Spud Webb, I couldn't name a lot of guys per se. But I did think it's a guy who, when you look at, yes, he had good individual statistics, but never really won anything and never took his team deep into the playoffs, really, even. You don't remember the Hawks making a deep playoff run and going head-to-head with Michael Jordan. No. The Knicks, the Pacers, yes, but not the Hawks. And, you look at some of those other teams, Knicks, Pacers, they had Ewing, they had Reggie Miller, they had one guy per se, so.
All right, so my number 3, another guy maybe you've heard of, those people out there, is, again, because of a nickname, Starbury, Stephon Marbury. He was a 4th overall pick. He played 17 seasons. He was only in the playoffs 5 times out of 17 years. He had a sneaker, all this
listen,
stuff.
I wouldn't rip his sneaker too
No,
much.
no,
He made
That,
affordable footwear
I will say,
for the
but
city kids.
right? No, I will definitely say he was affordable. But my point is that since he had a shoe name after, here's the big stat: the record of the teams he was on was 103 and 189. So we had a losing record.
Significantly.
Right. So I'm like, and this guy, like I said, that's why I put him up there. So Stephon Marbury.
Well, when you said that, I'm cracking up because he's my number 3 as well. Obviously, Jeff and I have, and we made these independently.
Right.
But obviously, we have the whole, I think Jeff and I went more not with the Hall of Famers type thing. I have Anthony, but just we were a little on a different page or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's all good.
I mean, it's okay to be wrong.
Yeah.
It's okay to think about it wrong, guys. You can do that.
2-1.
But for me, Marbury, one of the biggest things is he was just to me, he was like a team chemistry killer. He could not coexist in Minnesota with Kevin Garnett. If he could have coexisted with him, that could have been a really good tandem that they could have been there for years and surrounded them and done something. But he had to be the man and whatever. And what else did I put? I put, just to me, I think of Stephon Marbury. I think of wasted talent. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Bronx Tale or
Yes.
whatever, and that's the line from his the saddest thing is wasted talent. That's what I think of him. But one thing I was going to say with him is he also reinvented himself over in China.
Yes. Yes,
so
he did.
Yeah.
So, and I say again, I guess I think in my number 3, you're going to see here. I think of guys that have huge names that almost transcend the sport, that people generally know who they are, and just fell flat and or didn't get to the level that people think they're at. And the next guy might not look like this 10 years from now, but right now, if you say the name Draymond Green, people think he's some great player. And in my opinion, he's not. He made an all-star game. I think he made an all-star game because he was surrounded by great players, but he himself is not a great player. I think if you look at how he's playing this year, it exposes he's a good player. He's a good player. He's just not, in his world, what he did, the greatest defender of all time, he said. The Warriors win, I think, with or without him. That's my opinion. I think they win with or without Draymond.
I think when you look at the team, in particular this year, is that you think of Draymond, he should be the number 2 guy, to Curry, and what did they do? They didn't make the regular playoffs then. I mean,
right.
So I agree. I don't have him on my list, but I just meant I definitely agree he's overrated because I think if he went to some other team, if he got drafted to the Kings or something, I think he isn't anybody at the.
You wouldn't know his name, and that's where you make a great point, Jeff. Is that on any other team, if you have 2 great stars, you're going deep into the playoffs. Well, they have Steph Curry, who is a pretty darn amazing player. And they have Draymond, who, mediocre. So, I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's, got some attitude problems. He's got some, his mouth gets him in trouble, and the stupidity when it comes to things he says that don't help his team.
Well, I think part of the overrated in most people's eyes, or some people's eyes, including all 3 of us, is his, not that he needs to be confident, but he's almost to the point cocky, confident, arrogant,
arrogance, bravado.
Yes, beyond what
beyond where he is. I want you to be confident,
right?
But if you're going to talk all that talk, you better be able to walk all that walk, and I don't think he can walk all the walk that he talks. Right. Charles Barkley would point that kind of stuff out, and Charles Barkley talked the talk and walked the walk.
Right.
Okay. So my number 2, as already mentioned, Carmelo Anthony. I'll just, great scorer. The defense was not there. I don't think, again, he didn't make the people around him any better. He's never been in the finals, and like you said, he's been in the East and he's been in the West, so, it's not like one person or whatever. And again, but he was also, again, I look at some of these guys, something like him, he was the 3rd overall pick. Had a lot of hype coming in because he, was a freshman winning a national title and coming in. You guys said a lot about Carmelo.
All right, so my number 2 is Joe Johnson. So again, not a household name, but someone who raked in millions of dollars. 6-year, $124 million contract, at the time the highest paid of all time. Nothing to show for all that money. The Hawks fans, when he signed that deal with the Nets, were actually, woohoo! It's great, good riddance. That might even be why they're partially, not maybe. I don't think they got maybe Trae Young pick in the deal. I don't remember. Maybe they did, but partially why they probably are where they're at now is because they were able to get assets for him when he left. I don't know if he left there in a trade or a sign or just a free agent or whatever. But either way, they were able to get rid of him and his bloated.
It's another thing. Another definitely another way of looking at overrated. How much money some of these.
Yeah, right. Which is
that's a good metric that I didn't take into account as much, but probably should have. Again, I look at big names, and my number 2 is a big name out there right now, and he's a guy who will never, ever win a title. I don't care who you put him with, and that's James Harden. He will never win a title ever. He's with 2 of the greatest players that are in the game right now. And he's not winning a title with them, boys and girls. I got news for you. He's not. Because he's a selfish player. He plays no defense. And he would much rather have 60 points in a game. Don't take me out if I'm at 58. And lose than get 20 points and win. He doesn't get that you have to sacrifice individual things to win. And you can see it with all the teams he's been with. He's been with other great players. And he just can't get it. He will never understand it. And everyone thinks he's this great player. And you hear all about, I heard all season about how great James Harden was and how great. No, he's not. Sorry, just not. Overrated.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see next year when the rules change with these non-jumping sideways.
Yes,
and
I agree with that.
To draw fouls. Now, one thing he does do where he holds the ball out in front of basically 10, that's not going to change, I don't think. Where he basically, you're taught when you drive to the lane to keep it close, tight, and then go strong at the end out in front. But he literally wants you to slap at the ball. I don't think that's going to change, but he does get so many calls. What I think he's not going to get in the future years. So.
And I agree with that. And listen, he is a good individual player, a very, very good individual player. He's a great scorer.
Right.
But that does not equal greatness. If it's just about scoring points, yeah, great. He can do that.
Right.
But to me, in this game, like any game, it should be about winning titles.
Right.
It's about winning. At the end of the season, if you didn't win the last game, you're just not going to be as great as the next guy. And that doesn't mean it's just winning titles because then, Big Shot Bob is the greatest player of all time because he's got a whole bunch of titles. That's not it either. But you got to have a little bit of balance, all those stuff. So James Harden, my number 2 overrated player of all time.
All right, my number 1 is going on your lines here. And a lot of you may not agree with this. I put Vince Carter.
Your boys are not going to be happy.
Yeah, the boys will not be happy.
I like to hear your rationale.
Well, here's my rationale. Okay. He has all these nicknames. Vinsanity, Eric Canada, half man, half amazing, flying man. He's got all these. Okay. What do you know him as? A great dunker.
True.
Where has he taken anybody? He didn't play in a finals. Never played in a finals, which means he never had a team good enough
to make a career.
A really long career. So I will say, again, he was very consistent then, especially, and as you mentioned with Carmelo Anthony, how he's changed his game.
Right.
Because he can, but I'm going along, especially with Matt's lines, is that, he was very hyped up. Again,
do you have what pick he was? I don't remember.
I do not. That's why it's funny
how
he
was top 2 or 3.
He was very high.
3 or 4.
But again, I look at his teams.
Yeah.
Where did they go? I mean, Toronto at the time they were, they made it, but never went into a finals. So
interesting choice.
I didn't think of it.
You know, I take some umbrage with that because I put Vince Carter in a different place. You're right about the wins. I guess I just always think of him as one of those great dunkers, but not necessarily. Yeah, you're right. I mean, never took a team anywhere.
When I started looking at different lists and I saw
Yeah.
him on one, and I started reading him, like, wow, like, yeah, he didn't. What did he really do? So, you know,
I mean, I will say, I mean, for whatever it's worth, in his last few seasons, he played for love of the game. He didn't. He
I
could have
totally
jumped
agree with
onto
that.
a team and got a
Got a
title.
ring.
I totally
He
agree
could
with
have.
that.
He stayed with the team.
So that's what I mean.
For
But
love
so-
of the game.
But again, maybe we probably didn't have another guy with him. I'm not going to guess, but I mean, I didn't go delve into who all played with all
And
of
I
them.
will say he's doing a good job on ESPN.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he does a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
He's a stand-up guy.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, yeah.
yeah. So my number one, a fellow North Carolina graduate, or I don't know if I didn't graduate.
No,
Actually.
he
I don't
didn't
even
graduate.
know. I don't know. Either way, Marvin Williams. So Marvin Williams is a number two pick back in 05. He's accumulated over $109 million in salary, and he had 0 All-Star appearances.
So you I was going to say, so in terms of all three
Yeah, I
of us
know,
looked
yeah.
at, you definitely looked at money, wise,
Yeah.
how much money somebody's
Yeah.
making, which again, I think that's part of it too. Yeah, I mean, you're
Yeah, but most people out there might probably a lot of. I think he played 12 seasons, maybe to 17. I think so.
So it
That's
begs the question: how can you be overrated if no one knows who you are? Man?
Yeah.
So
If
that's
you're the number two pick, how do you
right. Well,
not
you
get
took
in?
into account the
Yeah,
picks, which
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
because
That's
to
how
me
I
it was
look at it, too.
NBA and your NBA career. Because you could have been. I mean, some of the greatest player of all time in NBA weren't high picks. I mean, look at
True.
Curry coming out of
But I also
college
look
wasn't
at-
like supposed to be anything, but he's going to be one of the best players
what
of
I
all
look
time.
at. What I look at for yours is that the guy still had a long career.
Right.
Like, obviously, if you're a first round bust like an Anthony Bennett or something, like
Right,
that's
right,
different. But I mean,
right.
this
What?
guy at least was in the league that
Well,
long.
now wait a minute, Alex. Okay, Okafor. How long has that dude been in the league?
I don't know. I can't remember when the Sixers.
I gotta think it's creeping on 10 years, right? He was like and he was a high pick. Was he 1, 2? What was he? Was it
2 or 3, yeah.
1, 2,
I
or
remember,
3?
yeah.
Anyway,
One or
so
two,
yeah.
the point is, he's god awful. A high pick, and he's going to be in the league for a dozen years probably and never do anything. Coming off the bench. So anyway, all right. Well, my number one has already been said on your guys' list already, and that is Carmelo Anthony. So again, when I look at people point out these great players, and I think that Carmelo Anthony, for the most part, is a household name for a lot of people. And you already said, I mean, he just never took a team to the next level. He was never willing to sacrifice enough to actually win. It was all about scoring points and not doing any defense. Only made it past the first round of the playoffs 2 times.
That was both when he was with Denver. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
never made the finals. And with the Knicks, 0 playoff appearances with the Knicks. So, we already talked all about him, but a long career and a good player, but overrated. Everyone puts him in this great category, I think, and that's where I think he is not a great player. He's just a good player. So, all right. We got any honorable mentions to bring up? Guys that you want to bring
I
up?
mentioned my one honorable mention was Big Dog Robinson. My other one was one of your guy, of course, James Harden. But the other one I mentioned, I put him on as honorable mention because he was on a list that I noticed. And again, I'll go by that criteria. Steve Nash. The guy won MVPs 2 in a row.
Yeah.
Had Amari Stoudemire, who almost could be
He's
be
another
overrated
guy
as
that's
well.
overrated.
But I mean, think about it. Again, the guy they didn't win anything.
Right.
2 MVPs in a row.
Right.
So,
Well,
It's a fair argument.
a fair argument, but if you go back and look when the Suns played the Spurs in the playoffs, I don't remember exactly. Somebody bumped somebody out of bounds. Somebody got suspended. It was one of those things or whatever. So he might have made a finals,
Right.
depending on.
But
Either way, you're right.
one up against lost up against one of the greatest teams of all time. I mean, in terms of the franchise and stuff, the Spurs had a long history of winning a lot of games. So again, maybe part of that is a great player or a great team in that case got in the way.
Right. So I have a few honorable mentions. Amari Stoudemire is among them. I think he was just a system player, pick and roll with Nash. He really didn't do anything after he left there. Now, he had injuries, but also that. I have Joe Smith, who was a number one pick in '95, who was a contributor throughout his career. So had a long career, but never really was what you should have been if you're picked that high. Blake Griffin, who I think was He's overrated, product of Lob City. I just don't. There's no results that he has to show for wins. I think he's more about show. Ralph Sampson, I saw on the list, and I was surprised. I was thinking that, and I was like,
"What did Ralph Sampson ever do?"
He was number 1 pick in 1983, and when you think about it, the Rockets ended up trading him to create space for Olajuwon. So
right, they couldn't figure out how to work together.
Right.
So
well, it wasn't. I think it was Sampson working with Olajuwon.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
I would agree with that because
Yeah.
But
And then the last one I saw on the list, and I was shocked, and I thought about it, and I had him as honorable mention, was Pistol Pete Maravich. Played 10 seasons and only had 2 playoff appearances or whatever. And I was surprised that he had only made the playoffs that many times.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when I was doing some of the research for this that a lot of guys you mentioned definitely honorable mentions for me too. My big one for honorable mention was Blake Griffin, because I just think here's again a guy, and I think a lot of it is for you kids listening out there right now. These are names that you know, and people think, oh, he's a great player, and really, is he? I mean, he can dunk, or he could dunk, and although the one dunk he gets credit for isn't even a dunk, and he didn't win anything, And a lot of these, I mean, Ralph Sampson's a great, a guy that coming out of college and was hyped up and all these things, and a lot, So anyway, what was interesting, I think, and if you go out there and do some research, you might find some guys on the underrated list and the overrated list, which was very interesting to me as I researched guys for this. Yeah. But I stand by my list and my criteria, guys. It's okay for you to be wrong in your list in the way you think about it. But clearly, if you want to know who was like a number 1 or number 2 pick, go to Matt Bannon here, because he knows, and that should set you up. Although there's definitely a good argument to be made to say that should set you up as a great player. But I really thought more of the household names. So after we're done, I'm going to ask my wife if she knows some of these guys' names, and we'll see if they're household names. All right, any final words, fellas?
I'm good.
All right, NBA's most overrated players. There they are. You've been listening to or watching the Two Matts and a Jeff podcast. You can get our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and like our YouTube channel. We'll see you next time.